Recording in progress.
Ready? All right, we'll call to order our pre-meeting for the Planning Commission. What's the date today? 20th of December. Jeez. We've got Commissioners Thomas, Hatch, and Margent excused tonight, and we wish Commissioner Thomas a speedy recovery from whatever's going on. So, sorry, I don't have my agenda up yet, so we'll just turn it over. Minutes, any discussion on the minutes? Remember, that's the first thing we always get to talk about. Nothing? Perfect. The next one is the only real public hearing item we got. I don't know who's doing it. I'm guessing, Ray, since you're sitting over there, you're in charge of the Jordan River Heights tonight?
I am.
All right. If you'll let us, go ahead and go. It's all yours.
So, okay. What it is tonight is it's a rezoning from, it's an R112 zone. They're requesting an R16 zone, but the reason they're doing that is to be able to develop the lots with a narrower lot width. They're actually developing the lots at 8,000 square feet or bigger. So as you're looking at that, or this tonight, just keep in mind that we're really looking kind of at an R18 zone with the only exception of a reduced lot width. And that's being handled. If it's zoned R16, then through a master development agreement that'll be in place on the property to hold the developer to basically R18 standards with a reduced width. So that's what's on the table for tonight. The developer will be here and we'll just kind of explain what they're looking at doing.
Great. Any questions? Commissioner Shelton.
The city council seems to be against an R16. Could you get into that, why they're against that? I think I know, but I just want to hear.
I think the biggest reason is that with an R16 zone, they just want to make sure that it's not rezoned to R16, and that for some reason down the road that the master development agreement is amended, and that that property be allowed to continue or to be developed under the R16 standards. So that's really kind of what's at play. They asked us to take a look at that. Maybe Duncan can chime in on this, like how solid is an MDA and.
Well, how easy is it to amend that MDA?
Very difficult because, and here's how it works. When you have a rezone in conjunction with an MDA, basically one is conditioned upon the other, right? Even though they're on the same council agenda, then the way it would appear on the council agenda is they would first approve the MDA subject to the subsequent zoning map approval. And then and other conditions precedent. And then if later on the agenda they approve of the zoning map, then it's subject to that MDA. So basically they go hand in hand, right? If both are passed one after the other on the agenda. And so that, in fact, the way we do the zoning designation, if this were to occur, it would be R16 and then in parentheses MDA. So it's an R16, but subject to the MDA. And only if it's something goes through the Planning Commission and Council again, right, would we typically ever amend an MDA, and then there'd have to be a good reason, and then they'd have to show something in consideration in return. What does the city get if they get a change? And if it's built out, which a lot of these smaller developments are right away, it would be in effect too late to change, right? At some point if they build all the houses. So that's why we do it that way, is to make sure that there's no way the city can lose out, so to speak, because they're going to have to convince at a minimum, majority of the council later, and the council's going to want to have something to see that they get in return, right?
It seems like there's some heartache over it, and I'm not.
So
here's
the other issue is that when you're in effect trying to take standards from two different zones and put them together, it's always a challenge.
Yeah.
And in theory, you could say, well, let's do R18 zoning, but let's just make it so that there's the frontage requirements of the R16, as opposed to what we're doing. Let's do an R16 zone. And let's say in the MDA that you have to do the setbacks and minimum lot requirements of an R18. And it's, in my view, much better to go the route that we're going here, because then you can tell everybody else that is R16 zoning, hey, these people are not being treated as well as you. You're being treated better than them. This is the only people that have to have 8,000 square feet minimums and all these setbacks. And then who's going to be the one complaining, right? Because everybody else is being treated better than this person. If you go the opposite route, you have the problem of why is he being treated worse than everybody else? And, or I mean, why
Why do they get preferential treatment?
why do they get preferential treatment? Exactly, yeah. And that's a much harder distinction to make. And then is it universally applicable to everybody in that zone? And you've had all these R16 developments and all these R18 developments forever. And you don't want to typically do something that changes the standards for all of those existing developments in those existing zones. And so, in my view, if you're going to do some kind of a hybrid zone, for lack of a better term, using an MDA, it's much better to do it the route that's being shown here as opposed to the other way, and it's potentially either giving preferential treatment to one developer over all the others in that zone, or trying to make something universally applicable to existing developments that raises a whole, can of issues. So hopefully, is that responsive to what your question was?
I guess my question was more in, I understand what you're trying to communicate to me, and it makes sense, but I'm trying to understand why the city council committee over development, or I don't recall the name of the.
Yeah,
I
land
read
use
some of their minutes, and it seemed like they were really stuck on not going to to R16, and they felt like they were giving something up by doing that.
Maybe I'll defer to Scott on that.
Well, that's actually very astute. I'm glad that you read those minutes. Come the new year, there's the potential to change how the council land use subcommittee works. Because quite frankly, we don't know what the entire council feels. We know, I think there were 2 members of the council. There's typically 3. I don't know if all 3 were part of that conversation. But this is different. You're right. This is out of the ordinary. And so, it shouldn't affect how you handle it this evening, but you should be aware that I'm working with the council office to bring this application to the committee of the whole, meaning the entire council, before, so we can have more of a dialogue and discussion about this hybrid approach. And then, take direction from them. But, we'll see. I mean, we're still trying to figure this out, and what is the best approach, and ultimately it's the council, being the legislative body, that will determine what is best and the highest and best use for that area. And they were, as you read those minutes, I don't want to put words in their mouths, but they were looking at the context of that neighborhood. You've got R16 PS, which is an old performance subdivision to the north, or R14, and then you've got the R112 to the south. And so there's sort of that in between, and they were looking just for a hybrid to blend the 2 neighborhoods. So,
Which doesn't exist in code, right?
yeah, and I think part of the request, and the developers can speak to this, it's a long, deep parcel, or 2 long, deep parcels. And so, if, applying the R18 lot widths, that affects their yield, bottom line, right? But they can speak more to that. But you're right in pointing out the fact that this is not typical.
And it'll be helpful in the future if that new process is adopted, where there's a work session and we do get a view of what the majority of the council wants before it comes to you, We just don't have such a process in place now. And it is a tough thing to guess based upon the views of just 2 or 3 council members, what the full council wants. I think that's the dynamic here, that, just to sum up what Scott said. And I think moving forward in the future, we'll have a better indication so we can make sure we're on the same page instead of inadvertently potentially on a different page, so to speak.
Commissioner Allen.
So along the same lines, if the property were to go R16 without an MDA, what are we really saying? These are deep lots. There's really only one way to put the street. Have we looked at what that could potentially do to yield? Is it a big change?
With the R16, I think just because of that, the lot width, it would be difficult to get those. You know, you're gonna end up with the same size lots anyway.
Right. So that was kind of the question I had. So, okay, that helps.
Anything else? Awesome. Greg, you got the next two.
We're just coming to show the public and yourselves our 2 new plans. First, the storm drain master plan, stormwater master plan, which our consultant's been working on for at least a year. And then the second is a low impact development standards that we'd like to adopt for the city. As you'll see when I go through the presentation, our current code refers to us having these standards, but we really don't have them. And so this is our first blush attempt at providing standards. The standards were prepared by Bone and Collins, and I think they've done a very good job, and they will actually protect the city very well in the future, because low impact design is something that's required by the federal government and by the state of Utah. So every development will have to incorporate something into their design in the future in West Jordan.
Any questions on either item? Awesome. We don't have training today, right? And tell me half of us here?
I'll train half of you. Okay. Okay. So, and I'll go through this as rapidly as you want, but at least you're meeting your statutory requirement for being trained. You know, so ever since mankind was put on the earth and became self-aware, whatever your belief system is, they've been territorial. You know, they've either put sticks together or rocks together, an old stump or a stream or something, and they've subdivided property, you know, because everyone wanted something of their own, you know, and so we've become more sophisticated, you know, in the modern times about how we subdivide property. And so with that, we have subdivision regulations. And I think an easy way to look at it is in the state of Utah, we're required to have a general plan, which the Planning Commission is working on presently. And if you look at the general plan, really doesn't have a way to implement itself. And so the 2 implementation tools that enforce this plan are the zoning ordinance 1 and the subdivision ordinance, along with various other plans like Greg will be talking about tonight, but we like to lump those all in under the umbrella of the general plan for the city. So it's an implementation tool. And so subdivision regulations are what we're talking about tonight. Of course, cities and counties are creatures of the state of Utah. They only get their authority as it is enabled by the good graciousness of the state we live in. And so this is only one statute that deals with subdivisions, but it says the Planning Commission shall prepare and recommend a subdivision ordinance to the city council, and then the city council adopts it. And so somewhere along the way in the history of West Jordan, initially a planning commission at one time recommended a subdivision ordinance to a city council that was approved. However, when you're amending a subdivision ordinance, you're in effect recommending an amendment to that, so you're changing the ordinance, so it's the same thing, but nothing in ordinance wise, when it's land use subdivision zoning, ever goes to the council without a recommendation of the planning commission, and that is because that is the way the state of Utah has set it up. You're the planners of the city. And so with that, we have subdivision regulations, they're Title 14 in our code, and they deal with subdivisions. Now, the difference between the two, zoning ordinance regulates lot area, building setbacks, building widths, building heights, and uses. Most importantly, that's what a zoning ordinance is. It's primarily a use table and what type of uses can be used on property. But a subdivision ordinance regulates more design principles, more engineering principles, more principles that make the property work in a safe and protect the health, safety, and welfare. Now, I'm not saying the zoning ordinance doesn't do that, because it does, but the subdivision ordinance does that also. So it has requirements for plats, frontage on streets. It requires that every parcel of property has a way to get to it. Because there are some really horror stories from around the United States and in our own beloved state of Utah where 50, 60 years ago, a shady developer subdivided property, but he didn't provide any way to get there. And so people will own pieces of property out in the middle of Uintah County, but they have no way to get there other than by helicopter. And so that is it's prohibited in the state of Utah. You cannot create a landlocked parcel. Subdivision ordinances deal with lot design, block design, and widths. You don't want blocks that are a mile long without some type of street that goes between them, because then it becomes very difficult for pedestrians to get here and there, and it becomes an inefficient way to design neighborhoods. Street design and connections. West Jordan, sad to say, does have some areas of the city that aren't well connected. They don't connect well at all. I've used the example before that my son, in the circle I live in and the circle next to him, he had a friend that was literally 4 houses away, but he would have to walk 1.5 miles to get to his friend's house, when he could have walked maybe 800 feet the other way. And so because they weren't connected. And street naming, dedication requirements. Now, dedication also not only includes street, but it includes Greg and Nikolai's world, the pipes and the water systems, the storm sewer systems, the sewer systems. Those are graciously given to the city of West Jordan by the developer, who the city of West Jordan gets to take care of it for the rest of time and all eternity. So that's what a dedication means. We don't pay for it initially, but in the long run it's paid for. Utility placement, public and private. It regulates private streets, sidewalks, trails, easements. I think everyone that probably lives in a dedicated subdivision plot has some type of easement on their property that is traversed by an electrical line, a cable line, or something. Fire protection, that's very important. That's one of the main things of the health, safety, and welfare of a municipality is we don't want people being burned to death in their home without fire protection, and soil and geotechnical requirements. So there's 2 types of subdivisions in West Jordan: a major subdivision, and that's approved by the Planning Commission. And that's 11 lots, 11 or more lots, that requires dedication of not only the streets, but our utilities, or a minor subdivision that may be approved by staff. Now I say may, because that can always be bumped up to the Planning Commission, for lack of a better word. So a minor subdivision is 10 lots or less, and this is right out of state code. The city has provided notice as required notice, is not traversed by a proposed street as shown on the general plan, does not require dedication, has been approved by the Culinary Water and Sanitary Sewer Authority. So staff can't do a 10-lot subdivision that the Municipal Water and Sewer Authority or the district will not service. It has to be in a zoning district. Okay, it can't be outside of a zoning district. And it conforms to all the ordinance, and it's uncontested. So we provide this notice, but neighbors come in and say, we don't like this idea. That immediately will have to go to the planning commission for a public hearing. So those are the two types of subdivisions in West Jordan. And I've just talked about these, but there's also some difference. Planning commission, you approved the preliminary plat, and that's usually the larger overall development, 100 acres of subdivision, may have hundreds of lots. You approve that, and then staff can approve a minor subdivision, as I just talked about, or the final subdivision, which is usually the phase part, 20 or 30 lots. And then staff also approves lot line adjustment. So if there's a lot line in a subdivision that needs to be adjusted, somebody wants a larger lot under the code, then that would be approved by staff. So in the state of Utah, plats are required for every subdivision, but I love how the state of Utah phrases it. So they say, unless exempted. So everything requires a plat unless it's exempted. And so I just talked about one of the exemption, and that's 10 lots or fewer. And then that would pretty much have to be on the street and have water lines and sewer lines and that type of thing. Or an agricultural division. We don't do a lot of those in West Jordan anymore, but in other parts of the state, grandpa might have 1,000 acres and he wants to give each son 200 acres or daughter or child 200 acres. That's an agricultural division. It has its own set of requirements that it has to follow. So what should be on the plat? I'll go through this really quickly. Of course, the name of the subdivision, the legal description, the surveyor who did it, where it's located on the earth, as you can see in the right-hand corner. What are the lots? What's the design of the lots? How big are they? What's the width of them? What's the acreage of them? And a lot number. How are the streets laid out? Do the streets, how do they connect all these lots? And in the city, all of our water and sewer lines are always in the public right of way. And so you could say street, that's also the water, sewer, and storm sewer lines. Who's around it? What's adjacent to it? So who's required to sign a plat? The professional engineer who did this, he's put his stamp on there that he is a licensed by the state of Utah, and everything he or she did on this plat meets professional standards, and he's willing to stake his professional reputation, their professional reputation on it. Of course, the property owner has to sign the dedication that they agree to have their property subdivided. And then there's also utilities that sign it: Rocky Mountain Power, CenturyLink, Comcast, Dominion, the county health department to make sure there's water and sewer, so we're not building houses where people don't have places to go to the restroom. Okay, and then also the planning commission, city officials, the West Jordan city engineer, or the city attorney, and the mayor himself with the city recorder attesting that he has signed it. And then, of course, last but not least is the county recorder. They are the ones who are responsible under the state of Utah to implement the plat and record it and keep it in their position forever. And you can see it is when the date and actual time that this plat is recorded, and it is stored on a Mylar document at the county recorder's office forever. So quickly, I'll go through this in 1 minute. So there's subdivision improvement guarantees. Now, there's two ways to record plats in Utah. You can record before construction. And what I mean by improvement guarantees is the guarantee that they will put the street, the sidewalks, the utility lines in that meet our standards. Because remember, we are taking those for time and all eternity and want to make sure that they will last at least a portion of time and all eternity. And so, first of all, the cost of public improvements are calculated by a staff engineer, not necessarily the developer. They will take a shot at it, but we always verify those figures and generally always amend them. So if they record before construction, which means they go record this plat, they have the lots out there, then they need to post 100% of the improvements. So if it's $1 million worth of improvements, they need to post $1 million bond. They then record the plat. They go ahead and install the street, sidewalks, utility lines. And after that is done and inspected we have many inspectors in the city, they go out and look at it, and is it accepted by the city, then they receive, then 90% of that bond is returned to them. So $900,000 of that million would be given back to them. For example, 10% of that, or $100,000, will be retained for 1 year as an improvement warranty. So if the street sinks, or there's a sinkhole, or the water line quits working, then the city hopefully has enough money to cover the repair of that. And then after the warranty period, 10% is returned to the developer. If they construct first, which means that they don't record a plat first, so they'd have no legal right to sell lots at that time, because you cannot sell a lot until the plat is recorded, then the cost of all the improvements are calculated. And then after installation, inspection, and acceptance, then they have to post that 10% or the $100,000 is our example for 1 year. The plat is recorded. Then after the warranty period ends, the 10% is returned. Now, if it's a private improvement, they have to post the entire cost of the private improvement. And then when that is constructed, then it's returned to them. There's no warranty period for private improvement. That means swimming pools, landscaped areas, pickleball courts, whatever, that are an amenity to the development. It is 6:01. I am done, so I won't be able to take questions. Thank you.
You're excused. We'll conclude our pre-meeting and just jump right into our main meeting. Just to reiterate, this is the Planning Commission meeting for December 20th. We have 4 of the 7 members present. Commissioners Marchant, Thomas, and Hatcher are excused for the evening. We'll just jump right into our meeting. The first item on the agenda tonight is review of and approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. Commissioner Allen.
I will motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Allen, seconded by Commissioner Wynn. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We're unanimous. Moving right into our public hearing. First item on the agenda tonight is the Jordan River Heights at 9270, 9290 South, 1300 West, a rezone of 9 acres from R1 10G, single-family residential lots to R16 with an MDA single-family residential lots for an 8,000 square foot minimum lots in that zone. Next Level Homes LLC is our applicant. Brandon, are you here? Is that who's coming in right now? You're on, yeah. Just, yeah, the mayor will show you how to use the fancy utilities up there.
Great. Brandon Pearson, 11099 South, Farnsworth Lane, Sandy, Utah. And I'm here, I guess, to chat about this. Has it already been presented, or? Okay. So obviously at this point, it's future land use is medium density, 8,000, 10,000 square feet, I think, fits in that medium density. It is zoned, I think, R110 is what you guys have it showing currently. Our request is asking to go to an R16, not necessarily to get the 6,000 square foot lots, which we have already, through your attorney, done a development agreement or back and forth for a development agreement with them, saying that we will not go lower than 8,000 square foot lots. Our request comes for the R16 to get the 60-foot frontage on those lots. And that's the only reason we're requesting an R16 rezone. And other than that, I probably don't have much more to say. It's pretty cut and dry, clear. We got lucky and ran into the neighbor to the west, and they wanted to possibly do a connection through there, and I think we could probably maybe work something out there too. So it's been a good meeting to come in and chat with everybody.
Okay, any questions for the applicant? Okay, we'll give you some time later if we need to.
Thank you.
guys sit down.
Appreciate it.
Mr. McCandless.
Thank you. So let me just take a couple minutes and orient you with the site. Show you where it's located. It's right across from the Glover Nursery on 1300 West, and it's roughly at 9270 South. So the property consists of two lots or two parcels. There's like a 2.7 acre parcel and then a 6.3 acre parcel. So the combined total of the property is 9 acres. So there's an existing home that's on the northeast corner of the property that'll remain as it is, and it will be incorporated into the subdivision when it comes before you at a later date. So the property as was mentioned, it's just move to the next slide. Well, there's the Countrywood Estates, as we talked about in the pre-meeting. This was an old R14 PS or performance subdivision, and the lot size, just to give you an example, is on the north side are probably around 4,500 square feet. So that's kind of the area that you're looking at there. Down where it says site, those lots are in an R112 zoning district, and those lots are all over 12,000 square feet. The Brigadoon Park was developed as part of that subdivision. And then to the property where it says West Polo Lane, that's on the south side, is zoned agricultural, and there are some single-family homes there. The property to the east is where Glover Nursery is also an A5 zone. So that just kind of gives you a context of what you're looking at here. As we mentioned, this is the future land use map, high-density residential to the north. This property is currently designated on the future land use map as medium-density residential. The park, obviously parks and open lands, and then low-density residential to the south. There is also an existing home that's on the west side of this property. That'll remain as is and is not part of this rezoning request. This is the zoning. Don't pay too much attention to the colors on the map, but here's the R14 PS performance subdivision. The R110G, which is what the property is currently zoned, and then the R112F, which is here. Agricultural zone, the A5 zoning extends across 1300 West. As was mentioned, the applicant is looking at, is requesting to zone this property to from the R110G zoning district to an R16 zoning, and in parentheses is an MDA. That's Master Development Agreement. The applicant is actually, as part of that, although the property would be rezoned to R16, the Master Development Agreement, which would be recorded and approved or adopted prior to the zoning on the property, would allow or require the property to be zoned or to be developed under R18 standards. So the minimum lot size would be 8,000 square feet. The only thing that the MDA would change would be that the lots within the subdivision would be allowed to be developed under the R16 standards rather than the R18 standards. So really you're looking at, I mean, when it gets right down to it, the question that you need to ask is consider is just whether or not the R18 standards make sense in this location given what's around it. So I hope I kind of answered that. This is just I put up a couple, these are the existing zoning standards for the different zones. As you can see here, this is the R110 zone, which the property is currently zoned. The minimum lot width is 85 feet. If the property were rezoned to R16, the minimum lot width would be 60 feet. And then if the MDA was approved as part of this rezoning request, the minimum lot area would be 8,000 square feet. The lot widths would be 60 feet, and then it would be developed under R18 standards for the setbacks and all the setbacks on the property. So that is, this is just a concept plan. There are 34 lots. Again, we're not going to be looking at details on this tonight. We'll be getting into those when the subdivision comes through. This is just a concept layout of 34 lots. The approximate lot area will be, or lot size will be around 8,600 square feet. Just off to the left side of the screen, that's where it ties into 1500 West. Part of that right-of-way would be on the adjoining property to the west, and then also part of that property would be to the on this property. So there are a couple of connections, but again, we'll be looking at that. So again, what's before you?
Sorry, really quickly, I'm just going to interrupt. Commissioner Shelton had a question you wanted to ask right now instead of waiting till the end.
Right, just, it's more relevant now than later, probably. I'm seeing a number of lots on this concept plan that are less than 60 feet wide. Can we address that?
They would have to be at least, if it was approved with the MDA, would have to be at least 60 feet wide.
I'm seeing one that's 55 feet wide,
Where are you looking?
lot 17. And lot 16 is,
16, 17. Oh, that's yeah, there is a radius on that.
is that not
corner.
the width?
No,
Oh,
Hold
can't
on,
be
hold
included
on.
in the width.
Let's have the conversation with Ray since he can get
Thank
recorded
you,
on the
sir.
microphone.
yeah. The lot width is actually 69, of lot 17 is 69.93, and lot 18
Oh,
is 60
I'm
feet.
sorry, I was looking at the wrong numbers.
Yeah.
My apologies. Can I throw just a curveball quickly?
You tried once. Go ahead.
Totally not even regarding this, but I would love to see a north arrow on these things. It just, I take time to orient myself every time I'm looking at one of these. If we had a north arrow, it'd just be beautiful.
On this one, north is up, right? Ray?
North is up. Also on this, I think we talked about this in the pre-meeting, that the city council did take a look at this, or not the city council, but just a couple members of the city council looked at this with the land use subcommittee, and and I think we talked about, what they were looking at on that. They would rather see it not rezoned R16, but there are other options that they asked staff to look at. But in looking through those different options that are available, we felt that with the implementation of the master development agreement, that would provide sufficient protection so that the lots were never developed under the R16 standards.
Oh, that didn't. What you've got for us?
What's that?
Do you have anything else for us? Sorry, I
don't-
interrupted you to let Commissioner Shelton ask his questions. Just making sure
No,
you were finished.
I think we're good. Thank
Okay,
you.
any other
Unless you have any
questions for
questions
staff?
for me.
Okay, this is a public hearing, so it looks like we've got quite a few people here who are interested in sharing some thoughts. So you've got to come up to the pulpit, just one at a time. You've got 3 minutes to address us with your thoughts. If you are speaking on behalf of a group, you'll have 5 minutes. If we get to that 3 minutes, we'll give you a notice and have you wrap up your comments as quick as possible. We'll turn the time over to you.
DeLon Fulmer speaking. Is it
Hang
on?
on 1 second, sorry, I forgot. When you start, just say your name and your address so we can get that on the record if there's any questions for
Yeah,
follow.
DeLon Fulmer, 1523 West Brigadoon Park Drive. So as if you're gonna actually, come in on Misty Fen and go on to Brigadoon, is you're gonna put 34 houses, which is, I think, is way too many houses coming through, because you have people coming off Misty Fen that comes up Brigadoon. That's the only access to Redwood Road, is coming through there. So you have a lot of people from South Jordan that comes all the way from, some of it 98th is at Polo Court, all the way through that whole thing is that you only have one access out onto Redwood Road. Oh, for everybody in there, and especially if you're gonna connect that is into Misty Fen, is it on top of that park, the only access out to Redwood Road would be only Brigadoon, which is a great concern for everybody that lives on Brigadoon, is having that many more houses thinking they're gonna exit out onto Redwood Road, that access only. And as if for some reason this does get ramped through, is it, I think is that lots need to be on a bigger size spot, but there has to be some type of platform, speed bumps, whatever we've been told, that they're not putting speed bumps is in places in West Jordan. But they're all over, is at different subdivisions. There's some down off 1300 and like 8600. There's some is at over, they're north of the church on 90th and 13th. So there are a lot of platforms, speed bumps, whatever you want to call them. But there has to be something is on Brigadoon if this does get pushed through. Is it to help curtail some of the speed through that area, because there is a little less turn at the top coming off, and as there's lots of issues on there. I know as we're supposed to have code enforcement, as in not having parking, is it during snow, is it right now there's 3 cars parked, is on Brigadoon, is on the turn, whatever, which makes it horrible, is it on there? So if some of those things are not gonna be taken care of, Brigadoon is going to be a nasty road for that many more people coming on Redwood Road. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm April Davis, and I am on Countrywood Lane, 1431 Countrywood Lane, and I'm here to speak not only for myself, but for a group of neighbors that are here. So just thanks for taking the time to let me speak to you today. I, along with my neighbors, are longtime residents of Countrywood, and we do support the land rights and the developers' rights to develop their land. However, we don't support the rezone of this tract of land to the R16 with the governing MDA, because we feel that it leaves too many future unknowns for existing residents on both sides of the situation. So in the MDA states, the agreement may be amended in whole or in part with respect to all or any portion of the property by the mutual written consent of the parties to this agreement. So we feel that the Next Level Homes in West Jordan City are both the parties to this agreement. And the public needs to be made aware that it can be amended with some signatures, the mayor, the master developer. And our understanding is that the public does not get to weigh in on this discussion. The only thing between the citizens and the density of the subdivision is the MDA. It is an industry practice for developments to be bought and sold once the zoning and subdivision approvals are put in place. The property is valued higher with a higher density. If Next Level Homes sells the development, they assign rights in the MDA to the new owner, and it is possible that the new owner or even Next Level Homes can amend the agreement with the city and build homes on the smaller R16 lots as zoned. Exhibit E, at the July 12th, the Land Use Committee did not recommend the zoning change R16 with the MDA because they know they can be amended. And Exhibit E indicates that they were also concerned about providing water to the high-density homes. We're curious of why the city's recommendation is to proceed with the zoning change to R16 MDA if the Land Use Committee advised against it with some very valid reasons. Why not request a rezone of R18? We respectfully ask that the Planning Commission consider that approving R16 MDA leaves too much vulnerability for the citizens of the city. It also allows for the applicant to pick and choose zoning standards that all other landowners adhere to in the city, and it creates a slippery slope for all future developments in the city. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Amy, can you hear us? It's your turn.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Amy Coffin. Sorry, it says that's my own name. I am a resident of 1474 Brigadoon. My property line borders this proposed change. I have a couple of questions that I would love to be addressed. What precedent has been set in the past to do a zoning change like this, where you're doing an amalgamation of both a R1-6 and an R1-8? If a precedent has not been set like this, what is the rationale behind doing it now except to acquiesce to what the developer would like to see? As some of my neighbors have expressed, our concern is the impact to our neighborhood as well, considering that we are a contiguous neighborhood with South Jordan from 9800 South, and Brigadoon Park is the only outlet to Redwood Road within this neighborhood. If, as my other neighbors have said, if there is a change with this developer and the agreement can be amended, it seems like the zoning would go right to R-1-6. We would like to see it stay the same at an R-1-10 if this is to be developed going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie, do you have anybody else online? Okay. There's a lot of you here. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Bring us back to the Planning Commission. I'm going to just go ahead and address some of these thoughts really quickly. First and foremost, just for record, is that what our role is in this tonight. Our job is to make sure that the proposal meets city ordinance. And if that's the case, our job typically just has us kind of push this thing through with a recommendation of approval. Does not mean that it's going to be approved by the city council. Ultimately, as you've noted, as the last speaker noted, the recommendations from the city council, the members of the city council and the sub-use committee, they're part of that city council. They'll have a further conversation about this at a later date. That's the date you really want to come back and make sure you have your voice heard. Our job is just to make sure that what is being proposed meets city code. That being said, there are a couple things I wanted to take a note of. Nate, are you still doing traffic? Who's doing traffic these days? Okay, do you want to come talk really quickly about traffic, and then we'll turn the rest of the time over to Duncan for my questions that I wrote down.
So I think the question was the traffic going through Brigadoon and how that would be addressed. So a couple of points I'll just make. One is that we're looking at a land use question right now, and I didn't quite hear the answer as to how many more lots we're getting under this rezone request versus if it was not rezoned. But either way, we'd be getting quite a few new homes. So the difference is what would be the question in how we would address the traffic. Otherwise, we're still getting a block of new traffic. As with every street, if there are problems with the number of cars or the speed in which they're traveling, then we will take a look at that. We'll go out, we'll take counts, we'll measure the speeds, and we'll find out what the nature of the problem is. We'll figure out quantitatively and numerically what the traffic impacts are or what the traffic problem is. Obviously, there would be probably more cars on Brigadoon. If there's a way to get through to Redwood Road through the neighborhood versus going out to 78th or to 90th, then they're gonna take it. They're gonna find that way. But we would do a traffic analysis and based on the findings of that, determine what type of traffic calming measures would be appropriate. Maybe speed tables, it may not, it may be other ways to calm the traffic down. But that's how we would address that. Again, I don't know how many exact more lots we're looking at or what the effect would be, but either way, we're looking at more traffic.
Okay, thank you. Well, we've closed the public hearing, so we're not taking any more public input this time, sorry. Ray, do you have off the top of your head how many different lots, how many more lots we're looking at with this proposal versus if it stayed at R110?
I mean, what they've got on the table right now, and again, it's just a concept.
Sure.
So we don't know for sure, but they're not going to be that that many, I'll bet the difference would be maybe 28
Yeah.
versus 34.
4 to 6
Maybe.
lots. Okay. That I just wanted to make sure we got that. The other two things I wrote down that were kind of concerned are more for like on the legal side. One, Duncan, the big one being the changes that can be made to the MDA without public input, because most of these changes still require public input. I'm sure there are some little tiny things here and there where the administrator can just sign off, but most of it, I'll let you speak to that. That's your world. And then the other one you talked about in the pre-meeting about why we're choosing to do this method of doing an R16 with some of the R18 setups as opposed to doing it the traditional way, as it were. So I'll let you speak to both of those just so that we can kind of get that on public for the people who did miss the pre-meeting.
It might actually be easier for Scott to start by answering the second question, which is there a precedent? And apparently there is one where the city did something similar with an R16, but with 8,000 square foot lot minimums. And then I'll answer the first question.
Well, I won't take credit for this. Julie is a tremendous resource, and so she can never retire. But she reminded me that not too long ago, but 2-3 years ago, there was a rezone. Some of you may remember on 6700 West and 8200 South, and it was a leftover remnant parcel, long and narrow, not too dissimilar from this, a little bit smaller. But the council rezoned that particular property to R16 with a development agreement that required minimum 8,000 square foot lots. And so it was a lot frontage issue in that particular case, just like this. And it is out of the ordinary, but is not without precedent. So hopefully that sets you up there, Duncan.
So going back to that first question, how hard would it be to amend the development agreement later? Is that kind of the gist of the question? And I'll answer it this way. If the code text amendment that the Planning Commission has already recommended and it's on its way to the council gets approved, then the process would basically be identical to this process. If somebody wanted to change the MDA, they'd have to come back to the Planning Commission, have a public hearing, have it be recommended, go to the council, have a public hearing there, and the council would have to approve the change and authorize the mayor to sign it. So it's not just the mayor signing it, right? It's the whole Planning Commission public hearing process, notice to everybody, council public hearing. The mayor just comes at the end of that process where if it's approved by the council, then and only then does the mayor sign that, in the same way that this current process would go, right? So it's the same exact process that we're going through now to change or amend that agreement later. What else was part of the questions that I didn't answer?
I think that was it. The big point being that this MDA comes to the Planning Commission for recommendation to the City Council for approval after the negotiations between the staff and the developer have been concluded.
Right.
With all the changes that everybody suggests along the way. It's not a short process, and that same process has to be repeated every time there's a request change in the MDA. And we've been pretty slow to change, to make a lot of those changes. There's not a lot of favor in favor of the developers, I can tell you, in the time that I've been doing this, where we're like, yeah, sure, we're gonna go and make that change for you. We'd like to hold people to what they promised at the beginning. We're very particular about making sure that the city gets what the city's signed up for in the first place. So that being said, now it's our turn, guys. Anybody have any thoughts they want to share? Commissioner Shelton, go ahead.
I'll start off by saying I would not consider this without the MDM in place, even though it's just a matter of, what is it, an additional 4 or 5 lots. I did want to ask one quick question regarding the R16. Is that considered high density at this point? What's the city standard?
So Ray can correct me if I'm wrong, but when we look at, well, at least with the general plan designation, medium density is R18, R110. I think the high density is R16 and so forth. And so, and in consultation with Larry, the main city planner, I think we looked at that it's the minimum lot size is what you base the density on. So this is, at least for general plan designation purposes, this is medium density, right, as opposed to
So because
high
of the
density.
8,000 square foot lots, it still fits the future land use
Use map of
map,
medium density, yeah, medium
even
density.
though it's zoned in a, what would be deemed a high-density zone.
Right, because of the minimum lot size.
And actually, you bring up a great point, Commissioner. Right now, you're going through a comprehensive general plan update, and Mark and Ray have meticulously gone citywide through, and it's a good opportunity to clean up. And so there's a lot of developed property that I guess it's a cartographic error that the general plan doesn't actually reflect the density built. And so a lot of the little minor changes that have been proposed by staff kind of reflect this very principle that the built environment is, it creates a certain density, and that should be reflected in the general plan.
Let's hear it.
I'm still thinking. No, I think Commissioner Quinning did a great job of explaining that essentially with the Planning Commission, we'll receive a recommendation from staff, which is fantastic. But our role at that point is to go through and say, does this meet with city code? And at this point in time, it absolutely does. It's not our responsibility. It's not our job to say whether or not we like something. It all has to do with whether or not it meets the code. City Council, as Commissioner Quinning pointed out, is where you'd want to go to talk a little bit more. They've got a little bit more of that leeway to move, per se. And with that statement, I'd be happy to make a motion unless anybody else would like to speak.
Just one last thought, if I could chime in, that it's not just complying with city code, but then you've got those other criteria, of course, that, but like you say, you're required as a planning commission to follow those criteria. You don't have the same legislative discretion that the council has. I think that's what you meant, so.
Yes,
So to piggyback on that, as the commission makes a recommendation to the council, if you could articulate and work through those criteria, that would help them.
Do we?
You
You don't
think
happen to
criteria?
have it up here, do you?
Yeah.
There we go.
And all the criteria here, the motion's right here.
Yeah, motion's up top. Criteria goes through. Okay. So based on the information and findings set forth in the staff report and upon the evidence and explanation received today, I move that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council, noting the need for approval of master development agreement as attached, and with the various conditions or findings of fact that are documented within the staff's report. I think they did a very good job. Thank you.
I'll second. I have a motion by Commissioner Allen, seconded by myself. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are unanimous. You guys got lucky. You got a good discussion today. I encourage you to stick around for the entertaining part of this meeting, which is going to be about the water the conversations that we've got coming up from Mr. Davenport. He's an entertaining speaker, so you guys are in for it if you want to stick around. Or you are also welcome to go ahead and leave if you don't want to, stick around for sewer talk. Next item up we have is the 2022 Storm Drain Master Plan Update. See, it's exciting, guys.
Nate says I should start with a joke, but I'm an engineer. I don't come with jokes. I'm sorry about that.
Commissioner Allen appreciated that.
But I know that this is Christmas time. I'll try and go through this quickly.
Thank you all for coming, by the way.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. This actually isn't working. Oh, because it's not up there yet. Do we have the presentation that goes with this?
I'm happy to table this to the next meeting if you don't have a presentation, because I got to take us to the Desert Charter night. I want to get out of here. It doesn't start till 8.
Or you just have to ask the person who's more technical than me to come up. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Greg Davenport. I'm the Utilities Director for West Jordan City. This is the beginning of our process. I'm sorry, it still doesn't work. Oh, there it does. Okay. So this is the beginning of our process of updating our stormwater master plan. The last one was updated in 2015. It is a part of the general plan. When you update a master plan, you look at your existing inventory and the changes that have taken place since 2015. You evaluate those changes with a storm. In West Jordan, it's a 10 and a 100-year storm. You find deficiencies and then you prepare a plan to address those deficiencies. This is the start of our process, and so we're hoping to start our public feedback period. I've already gotten a little bit of feedback from some of the planning commission members, so I appreciate that. The best part about this is I'm able to give this to the public, and anyone, if they want to, can come and look at this plan. So let me go over our existing system just for a second. For those of you who aren't familiar, our system is made up of manholes, inlets, pipes, canals, detention basins, retention basins. Here's a look at Bingham Creek, which is a natural channel. All of the stormwater in West Jordan eventually gets to the Jordan River. After our consultant, this was Hanson Island Luce, updated our existing system from what it was in 2015 to 2022. They looked at it from 2 design events. The first design year event is a 10-year event. They looked at that in the roadways. Typically, a 10-year storm is we hope to put that in the pipes or in a small portion of the roadway. The 100-year event storm, we look at basins, channels. Sometimes we look at it in some subdivisions, especially if they have downslope cul-de-sacs. In a 100-year event, you're looking at storms going from sidewalk to sidewalk. After they have updated that system, they will use a computer model, and they'll also talk with city staff to see if there are any deficiencies in our system. What you're looking at here, this picture, is a picture from this summer. I don't know where all of you live in West Jordan City, but this is a subdivision in West Jordan City after we had a 100-year event. And I'm glad that they didn't show the kids that were swimming in this event. I don't know how we got that picture without it, but there were actually kids swimming in this. They had a boogie board or something that they were using, and I'm glad they didn't have a car. The police had to come to make sure they didn't pull each other with cars. But this is an actual location. This is out by the Ronwood Park area, and we had a problem with the natural channel. Some of the deficiencies that we've also identified in this report happen along 3200 West. In a pipe system, there are also deficiencies in Barney's Creek with some of our culvert crossings at 4800 West, and we also have some detention pond facilities that have some problems as well. One of those is near Railroad Park, which is the railroad, and I want to say 4200 West between 90th and about 8200 South. So after they've come up with those, they've determined what areas are deficiencies, they come up with projects that we can complete. Some of those are maintenance projects, some of those are developer projects. Our list of projects in this plan is over $100 million, and about half of those are maintenance projects, half of those are development projects. The maintenance projects are funded from a utility rate fee. The developer projects are funded through impact fees. Do you guys have any questions? I told you it would be quick.
I have one.
Microphone. Commissioner Shelton.
Microphone. Thank you. I have a neighbor whose basement's been filled twice by maybe 100-year things that happen more than once every 100 years. The city's done quite a bit of work in creating drainage under. It's on Dorley Drive near Dorley Park.
Okay. That's by the Railroad Park.
That's
area.
near the Railroad Park, Railroad Park 2, yeah. But then in the report, it said that Dorley Park is also considered insufficient storage or insufficient drainage. That's just right in my neighborhood. I was just wondering, are there plans for Dorley Park, or improving drainage in that bottom part of that neighborhood?
So I know that one of the plans is to increase those detention ponds and maybe also look at the outlet. I haven't seen plans for along the streets. This is an important time for the public. If the person that you know, your neighbor, has a existing problem, they should let us know because this plan is not adopted yet. And it's still time for us to add things. So please let them know that they can email me directly or give it to you and you can email me. However it is, I'll make sure it gets back to the consultant. Again,
think
this is our time.
I think his specific problem has been resolved,
Okay,
but, because this was a number of years ago, but
okay.
it's an important issue, yeah.
I have been out, again, that picture that I showed you, I go out on floods in West Jordan every year. The utility money, the fee that our residents pay for those rates that's very, very important, and it helps people in our city right away. And so, I know how desperate it is for those people. When a flood happens, we're there mostly to protect lives and do cleanup because the power of water is amazing and there's not a lot we can do in the middle of that storm. If you saw, we do not have enough sandbags, we do not have enough people to reroute the channel that actually came through their subdivision. So the best we can do is work before the storm happens to make sure that they're protected. It's harder during the storm. Again, we're really relegated to sandbags during a storm event. So, but if you know of any problems in the area, if you're in the city, if you are aware of something and you want to comment, please let me know. Again, this is a plan in process.
Any other questions, thoughts?
So I reviewed all this, I've already forwarded the comments, and thank you for noting that. I thought it was a very professional document, and I think it's going to be a great resource for us for capital planning, master planning, trying to understand moving forward. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, this is a public hearing. Oh, did you have something? Okay, public hearing. So we'll go ahead and open up the comments here for the public. If anybody has any questions. As long as he only closes one door, we're still compliant. Do we have anybody online? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing, bring us back to the public planning commission for further comment or a motion. Commissioner Wynn.
I move that the planning commission forward a positive recommendation to the city council to update the West Jordan general plan to include the 2022 storm drainage master plan update as presented.
Commissioner Allen.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Wynn, seconded by Commissioner Allen. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are unanimous. All right, on to our last item, the Low Impact Development Standards Manual. All yours again, sir. Hey, good to see you again.
Thank you. I know, right? This is a busy night for me. These issues really go hand in hand, so I'm thankful that you let us come here and talk with you. Let me go to this part right here first. In current city code, code 8-11 5C.1, I won't read the whole thing, but it talks about when anyone connects to a city storm drain system that they need to make on-site installations so that the city is able to handle the runoff generated by that property. And it says this, it says at a minimum LID, best management practices and attention shall be provided to meet stormwater management regulations as outlined in the city storm drain design standards. Whew. Okay. We don't actually have any LID BMPs identified in the storm drain design standards. This is our first attempt at doing that. Since this code has been created, we've been using state standards as our standards. And this is our attempt to adopt these. And I think that these standards have been developed by Bone and Collins, and they've done a great job. As you know, or as you may not know, the theory behind low impact development is to keep the stormwater on the site and to try and get it to go into the ground. Two things it does, it reduces peak flow, and it also increases water quality to the water that we discharge to the Jordan River, because as the peak flows increase, they take fertilizers and chemicals and oils and they put them right into the river, where if they can go into the ground and they can keep that on site, then those things that are dangerous to wildlife and other areas, they don't get into the river. So that's the theory behind low impact development. I just want to go over a couple of the BMPs that are talked about in these standards. The first one is an infiltration basin. And what the infiltration basin does, that's a fancy name for a retention pond. And we seem to have more and more in those cities. This functions, again, to limit the peak runoff and to allow the pollutants to go into the system. Some of the limitations for this, and right now we don't really have limitations. That's why adopting this would be the best. You really don't want to have a retention facility closer than 5 feet to the groundwater table. You really don't want to have a retention system that has water in it for more than 72 hours. You really don't want a retention facility closer to any foundational structure than 15 feet, although we'll probably want to change that a little bit and put it 15 feet from a property line just to be safe in the final version. But these limitations can really, really help, and we don't have them right now. We just have them specified as this is something you could do. This is what the state talks about. Here's another common infiltration practice that you probably see all the time in the Plan Commission. This goes under parking lots. This is a storm tech chamber. And again, the idea here is it goes under a parking lot, it goes into the ground, and this is a popular and very effective stormwater BMP. Another BMP that the city is looking to adopt is a harvest BMT. It's actually legal in the state of Utah to harvest rainwater if you want for uses around the home. They do limit how much you can harvest. So I believe it's 2 barrels of 55, or a cistern, you can go up a little bit more. The idea behind the harvest BMP is you're able to capture it and you're able to use it in your garden or wherever else you would like to use it. The last BMP that we're going to talk about today are rain gardens. These aren't necessarily retention facilities, but they're areas that stormwater can go onto, and they can water plants or make your landscaping look nicer. They're ideal for projects that are small in size. And this looks really beautiful. I'm not sure if this is in West Jordan or not, or even there are some mountains there. I don't know if it would have this much color. Sometimes drought tolerant plants don't have as much color as this. But it can provide beautiful shade, and it can really help in certain areas. The last thing that we have are filter systems, or is that planter box, which this can be placed anywhere. It discharges away from the foundation. It actually keeps it away from their foundation if you built that right. Okay. Again, I promised that I would be short. Do you guys have any questions about the low impact development standards?
Commissioner Shelton.
I wanted to ask about the detention ponds, but I think you kind of answered my question on mosquito abatement. Is it, there's a 72-hour maximum period because of mosquitoes?
That is correct. So the reason why we don't want to go longer than 72 is because they'll hatch insects, not just mosquitoes, but other insects as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wynn.
With what you've told us tonight and in previous meetings, it seems to me that there's a tremendous amount of work and activity going into managing our water better, which is good, I suppose. I think I heard in the governor, just within the past week, the governor's budget is allocating millions of dollars more towards water management. So what in the world else could there be to do beyond what you've already done and already doing?
And there are two different questions when you're talking about water management. There is a storm water management, and the things that we've been talking about, they actually were adopted by the EPA in about 2014. They were adopted by the state of Utah in 2018, 2019, and we're just catching up. A lot of the budget that you're going to see from the governor coming up, I think, is going to deal with the Great Salt Lake and how we get water to the Great Salt Lake. And then the other thing that they're going to talk about is how we use the culinary water resources that we have right now. There are pilot projects going in the state that are trying to figure out how to stretch the water that we get even farther. South Jordan's doing a pilot project right now that's the first ever of its kind in the state of Utah, that's working with recycling wastewater so that it can be reused either as secondary water or as culinary water. So there are a lot of different things that are going on right now in the state of Utah because we have an influx of people, but we don't have an influx of water. So I think that's what you're really going to see. They'll probably do a lot more money centered towards drought-tolerant landscaping and removal of turf as well. And start with state and then go in other places as well, parks and other places.
What it sounds like is Commissioner Wynn really wants you to come up with some more plans so you can keep coming back and presenting to us. All right. This is also a public hearing, so we'll go ahead and let you sit down, Mr. Davenport. Bring this back to the public. If there's anybody who would like to speak about this, the time is yours. I'm guessing we don't have anybody left online and nobody in here. Nate, any thoughts on the water? I support it. Okay, that's good to know. We're gonna close the public hearing on this and bring it back to the planning commission for discussion or possible action.
So this is another very positive document. I think the bigger comment I had on this one was, while it's written very professionally and very well, the implementation part of it, I think, was a little bit lacking. That said, sounds like, or looks like you're nodding, and yes, we're going to take care of this and look through it. So I'd move that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council to adopt the Low Impact Development Handbook for use in the City of West Jordan as presented.
Commissioner Shelton.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion by Commissioner Allen, seconded by Commissioner Shelton. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We are unanimous.
Motion to adjourn.
And we are adjourned.
Thank you all for your service in 2022. We'll see you next year.
Are we meeting January 2nd? Is that
We're not sure at this point. It might be postponed. We might not have any agenda items until, it'll actually be the 3rd.
It would be the 3rd.
sorry, the 3rd.
It might be postponed to the 17th. You'll know by Thursday, though.
Okay. I won't be here if we do hold it.
Okay.
But, okay.
Recording stopped.